Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just gone over the entirety of the Brandon Ayuk saga, one that lasted 198 days. A shame we couldn't make it to the big 200, but a very long, drawn-out process that ends in Brandon Ayuk getting a 4-year, $120 million contract. In this segment here, we're going to move over to the sport of college football, talk about all the biggest games from yesterday, as well as previewing a bunch of the biggest games in the slate for week 1 as the weekend approaches. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some college football today. College football, the big headline from yesterday is the Colorado versus North Dakota State game. And the big headline from there is Travis Hunter. If you were not watching and you don't know anything about college football, you should know the name Travis Hunter. He is going to be a problem at the next level. He's going to be a problem all year long. Travis Hunter is a very special prospect. Not only is he a top-tier wide receiver, 7 catches, 132 yards, and 3 touchdowns, one of which coming on one of the greatest catches I've ever seen, a heavily contested fade ball that's underthrown. That was one of the problems for Shedeur Sanders last night, although he also had a very good game. A great adjustment, body control on the ball for Travis Hunter. Scores his 3rd touchdown of the game. Not only is he an elite receiver in the college football world, but he also plays corner at the same time, coming out and playing almost every single snap of the entire football game. He is something special. His motor is insane. His agility, speed, and ball skills are something of a marvel. He's just a special football player. Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback for Colorado, finishes with 445 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and a fluke interception, one that bounces off the calf of a defender that is lying on the ground. And another receiver had a huge game. Jimmy Horn Jr., 7 catches, 198 yards, and a touchdown. For Colorado, it's not all good. They did end up winning the game 31-26, a very tightly contested game. They only had 2 yards per carry on the ground. And you're going up against a defensive unit in North Dakota State that was built to stop the run. They also were running all over you defensively, and it wasn't just on the ground. Defensively for Colorado, it was awful. North Dakota State could get just about anything they wanted to. They were eating up clock, especially in that first half, entering halftime with a lead, stuffing them on 4th and 1 a couple of times in their own zone. There were just a bunch of mistakes. The offensive line for Colorado, even though it was supposed to be revamped, was supposed to be a strength of this new team, ended up really hurting them in the end. Shedeur Sanders made a lot of really impressive throws with pressure in his face. That's not a situation that you want to be. This is an FCS school. For as good as the Bison are, it's an FCS program. If they go and they do this against Utah, they are going to get killed. They are not going to stand a chance. If they have an offense that's as high-powered as Colorado's, with any remote kind of skill defensively, those teams are going to kill them. I'm a little worried about Colorado. They were supposed to take a big step. Ultimately, they did not. The only other close game that took place last night was between UNC and Minnesota. This game was basically the opposite of the Colorado-North Dakota State game. This one was a field goal fest, a defensive, hard-nosed game. On the ground, like I said in the preview for yesterday, Omarion Hampton went off 30 carries for 129 yards. This game came down to the wire. They were trading field goals down the stretch. Minnesota lined up for a 47-yard kick to end the game. Unfortunately, it sails wide right, and UNC escapes with its first true road victory since 1985. Mac Brown improves to 5-1 in opening games. They do lose a quarterback, though. Quarterback goes to the hospital with a leg injury, had to get taken off of the field. Hopefully he's okay. They were running a 2-quarterback system, so they were able to survive it. For Minnesota, their run defense, not very good. Still, they were able to get a lot of stops defensively, and it was a kind of a sloppy game. The offense needs to get going a little bit more. We saw transfer quarterback from New Hampshire only throw for 166 yards when last year he was averaging over 300 a game. They need to get some offense going. The defense is a good sign for both of these teams. They both have new defensive coordinators, and they both showed out in their first game. Now, it might be against weaker offenses, both offenses that either lost a lot of talent, or were getting a lot of new guys in. So it's not the greatest test, but a 19-17 victory for North Carolina and a big one against a Power 4 opponent. Those were the two biggest games that took place yesterday. But there are a bunch of games that I want to go over today for the weekend. 3 of them between 2 ranked opponents. Should be a lot of fun. The starting one, the opening one, we get to see number 1 overall in the AP preseason poll, Georgia take on Clemson. Clemson keeps scheduling these tough games to begin their schedule. It's an interesting strategy if they can play close against Georgia, who by far I think is the best team in college football. Maybe the only other team I think, looking at it roster-wise, that can stand up to them toe for toe, I think might be Ohio State. Now, a lot of things can change down the stretch. This is not going to be good for Clemson's playoff chances. Now, in a new 12-team playoff league, if they can keep it close against Georgia, the spread for this game is sitting at 11.5 towards Georgia. If they can cover that spread, keep it to single-digit game, or at least a respectable game against a really, really good Georgia team, it could go a long way for their playoff resume. Georgia, again, is the number 1 team for a reason. They're returning 7 defensive starters, quarterback Carson Beck on a defense that always was one of the best in the countries. But don't sleep on the Clemson defense either. Clemson got hot down the stretch. They started off a little bit slow. Quarterback Cade Klubnik comes back. He's been a lot better, especially down the stretch. Their defense, that was ranked 7th best in the nation last year, returns a whole bunch of starters. The one thing is that they lost the entirety of their defensive line. They have some nice recruits coming in to replace that, but if they don't make use of the transfer portal, and I think that's going to be the downfall of this Clemson team. That's been Dabo Swinney's thing. He's been unable to adapt to the transfer portal. We'll see if this new defensive line can do anything against a very, very stacked Georgia team. I personally don't think so. I think I have a little score prediction for all of these games. This one, I have Georgia winning. Basically a home game, although technically it's neutral field. They're playing in Atlanta, so might be even more of a home game than when they play in Athens. But I have them winning 38-21. The next game that I wanted to highlight on Saturday is Penn State going down to Morgantown, West Virginia, taking on the West Virginia Mountaineers. This, I think, is going to be a very good game. The spread currently sits, Penn State is favored by 7.5 points. Penn State's defense, as always, should be really good in this game. They're going to have a new defensive coordinator, a new offensive coordinator. It's basically a brand new coaching staff outside of James Franklin for Penn State. That defense should be really good. The one question is, can Drew Aller improve? The quarterback on Penn State last year is back once again. He struggled last season. The defense for Penn State kept them in the game, kept them up there. They were a very Iowa-esque team last year. A lot kind of like Ohio State was last year, with a really, really good defense, but a quarterback that just could not get it done. And if Drew Aller can't take that next step, Penn State is going to be in trouble against a West Virginia team that is hungry, really took a big step last season with quarterback Garrett Green. He returns. He's up on the field. They struggled against Penn State last time, but this is not going to be a cakewalk of a matchup. West Virginia is going to be very good. They can fight for a playoff spot, maybe even a conference title in the Big 12, although that will be tough this season. I'm leaning towards Penn State victory, although I do think West Virginia will cover the spread. I have this game finalizing at 27-23. Then we have another fun FCS Power 5, Power 4 school matchup. This time between South Dakota State University taking on number 17 Oklahoma State. And this one should be a lot of fun. South Dakota State is the next up in the FCS. We talked a lot about North Dakota State yesterday, how they were a dynasty, won 9 of the last 12. Well, South Dakota State is currently the number 1 ranked FCS school. They've won 29 straight games. They've won back-to-back national titles in the FCS. This is not a team that you can just look over. This is a really good FCS team. Mike Gundy is 15-0 versus the FCS, but he often plays them close. He often gives them scares. And if you let South Dakota State stay in the game, they are a team that absolutely will take advantage of that. Their turnover margin is one of the best in the country at plus 16. They start fast. They outscore teams by almost 100 points in the first quarter. They haven't given up over 21 points in any game. I do expect that one to end. I think Oklahoma State, with their offense powered by Heisman contender Ollie Gordon, running back, going to be one of the top picks in the draft. Definitely a Heisman contender in Ollie Gordon II. But don't sleep on South Dakota State. Their quarterback, Mark Goronski, has gotten some NFL hype. He just won the Walter Payton Award last year for the best player in the FCS. This is going to be a very good game. Right now, Oklahoma State is favored by 10 points. I am leaning towards Oklahoma State pulling out a tight victory, but I definitely think South Dakota State covers the spread. I have the final score 30-24 Oklahoma State. There's a couple more games that I wanted to highlight before we moved on to fantasy football, including Miami of Ohio taking on Northwestern. And you might look at me and say, hey, we've been going all over all of these other games. Why is that one next on the list? Miami of Ohio is a dark horse group of 5 contender to get that last spot. You talk about a lot of teams that are up there, your Boise States, your App States, your JMUs, your Tulanes. Miami of Ohio is a team that should absolutely be in that conversation. They went 11-3 last year in the MAC. 11-3 last year in the MAC, going up against a good Northwestern team, led by reigning Big Ten Coach of the Year, David Braun. They went 8-5 last year. This is a team, both of these are on their up and up. Right now, Northwestern is favored by 3.5. I want to talk about this game because I think Miami of Ohio pulls off the upset here. Right now, Northwestern is favored by 3.5, but I think Miami of Ohio comes into Northwestern and wins this game, 21-20. And one more upset that I want to talk about before we get into arguably the 3 biggest games of the slate this weekend. Richmond taking on the University of Virginia. Richmond is another FCS school that shouldn't be taken lightly. Richmond just is coming off a second-round performance in the FCS, returning a whole bunch of starters, as well as a bunch of defensive starters. They were the 5th-ranked defense in all of the FCS, going up against a UVA team that, while definitely improved, I do like their quarterback as a true sophomore, is a really bad defensive unit. This is a team that should be on upset watch. The spread is UVA favored by 19 points. I love Richmond plus 19. That might be one of my favorite bets this entire college football slate, but I think Richmond might even be able to pull off an upset. I have them winning this game 36-35, shades of the JMU UVA game that took place last year, where we got to see a UVA team just get outmatched. And UVA is not a very good team, but I think Richmond can take care of business. Now on to the big three of this weekend. Starting off in the Swamp, University of Miami, the U, goes down to the Swamp for the first time since 2008 to take on state rival, the University of Florida. And this kicks off Florida's brutal schedule. Florida probably has the most difficult schedule in the entirety of college football. And this is a hot seat year for Billy Napier. He needs to show up and he needs to show out. And this would go a long way against number 19, Miami. Miami is relying a lot on the transfer portal. Cam Ward, Damian Martinez, running back, quarterback duo come in from the transfer portal. They should be really good. Again, we saw what the transfer portal can do, so I'm a little more cautious after the Florida State team looked just kind of discombobulated out in Europe. But Miami's a very, very good team. Again, like I said, this is the first time in the Swamp since 2008. The last time that they won in the Swamp was 2002. There's not too much to point to for Florida, right? They're a team that brought in a couple of transfers, had a solid recruiting class that kind of got taken away in the second window. I'm a little worried about them. And as much as we talk this matchup up, as people are saying, oh, it might be close, the spread is 2.5 in favor of Miami. I don't think this game will end up being that close. Miami's 8-1 in the month of August in their last 9 games. I don't see that changing right now. I think their transfers will work out, and I really am a big fan of this Miami team. I have Miami winning 31-17 in the Swamp, although that will be a very fun game to watch. Up next, we have 2 top 25 matchups. Number 7, Notre Dame taking on number 20, Texas A&M. And this is going to be a defensive battle, I think. I know Notre Dame brings in former Duke standout quarterback Riley Leonard. They have a new offensive coordinator coming in from LSU. This is a very, very good defense on both sides. Obviously, Notre Dame's defense usually is one of the better ones in the country, but don't sleep on Texas A&M. Their defensive line is going to be great, and an offensive line on Notre Dame that generally is solid. Lost 2 starters to the draft, lost 1 starter to injury for the season, now has to start a freshman on the edge. That's going to be the big battle. How will the Notre Dame offensive line hold up against a really good Texas A&M defensive line? That's where it's going to come down to. And I think that Texas A&M defensive line is just going to be enough to pull ahead. I do think this is going to be a slugfest, a defensive battle. Texas A&M is favored by 3 points. I think they win this game 17-16. And the final game that I wanted to cover is another top 25 battle between number 23 USC and number 13 LSU. This is a battle between schools that just produced the number 1 and number 2 overall picks in Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, Heisman winner, both Heisman winners. They both go 1 and 2. Now we have new quarterbacks on both sides. Both of these quarterbacks performed very well in their bowl games last season, with Garrett Nussmeier going 31 for 45, 395 yards, and 3 touchdowns in his bowl game for LSU, while Miller Moss went 23 for 33, 372 yards, and 6 touchdowns in their bowl game for USC. Both of them have very solid offenses. I think they're going to struggle a little bit. The defense for LSU definitely has the advantage. Both offenses should go. I do think it might be a little sloppy, though. And because the defensive advantage is there for LSU, I'm going to give this game to them. Right now, they're favored by 4 points. I have a final score of 31-27, LSU taking it with a push on the cover. Let me know on the spread. Let me know what you think of any of these games. Any other games that I didn't cover that you want me to take a look at, go ahead and throw that in the comments real quick. I'll try and get to them before the show ends. But we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to take a look at tight ends in fantasy, the final of our Big 4 fantasy group. We're going to take a look at where I have them ranked 1 through 24. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.